He was supposed to show up around 12. I was already waiting for him at the elevators, dressed as a cleaner. Finally, Chris appeared at the entrance. Immediately, I put the mop in the cart and quickly followed him. Chris Sparks was a controversial photographer, and he dug up dirt on my boyfriend Ben. I had to steal the flash drive with the pictures right out of his pocket. I was almost at his side when the big guard called out to me. "Stop!" I pretended not to hear and quickened my pace. But the guard grabbed me by the elbow and abruptly blurted out, "I told you to wipe it here." I tried to pull away. I couldn't let Chris go, but the guard made it clear that it was pointless to argue. I grabbed him up and quickly wiped away the stain. The guard turned away, pleased with himself, and I saw Chris step inside the elevator. The doors were slowly closing behind him. Damn, I'm missing him. Then I kicked the cart as hard as I could. It slammed the elevator and immediately blocked the doors. The noise made everyone in the hall stare at me. Oh, I'm so clumsy. Sorry. I quickly pushed the cart into the elevator and pressed the button for the top floor. I only had 15 seconds to get the dirt from Sparks. The doors closed. The game began. The stakes were high. Tomorrow, my boyfriend Ben was going to participate in the final stage of the mayoral election, for which he had been preparing for a whole year, and I helped him. If Chris handed over the flash drive with the dirt in the hands of journalists, Ben would lose. And here I was, disguised as a cleaning lady, standing in the elevator next to Chris. I did everything according to plan. I took out the glass cleaner and began to wipe the mirror. Then I deliberately sprayed on some Chris's jacket. I'm sorry, I'm so clumsy. The jacket needs to be washed urgently, otherwise the liquid will corrode the wool. Before Chris knew it, I'd already taken off his jacket and was ostensibly scrubbing at the stain. In fact, I definitely reached into the inside pocket of his jacket. We knew that Chris carried important things there. But there was nothing inside. Where was the flash drive? At the moment, Chris thanked me, took his jacket and turned to the mirror in the elevator to adjust it. Then I saw him put something small in his back pocket. So he was holding the flash drive in his hands all this time. I looked at the panel. We had almost reached the top floor. There wasn't much time left. So I took a couple of steps toward Chris. Sure, getting the flash drive out of his hands was a lot harder, but I had to try. I was standing right next to him. Suddenly, the light flickered, the cabin jerked and the elevator braked sharply. I swayed, got thrown off, and bumped my forehead lightly against the stupid cart. This was my chance. I pretended to hit myself hard and asked Chris to get me some water. He became nervous, turned to the cart, and started looking for the bottle. At this time, I reached into the back pocket of his pants and found the keychain, which apparently was attached to the flash drive. I grabbed it and pulled gently. That's it. Almost got it. Then Chris turned around. He was holding a bottle of water. I jerked my hand away and pretended I wasn't thinking straight. The damn flash drive was still in his pocket. Chris said that he needed to call a doctor soon and immediately reached for the call button for the dispatcher. Not that. If the elevator went, I wouldn't have time to pick up the flash drive. I immediately grabbed Chris by the shirt, pulled him to me, and not knowing what else to do, tried to kiss him. I'm sorry, Ben, but this is all for you. As I reached out to kiss Chris, I reached into his pocket with a flash drive. A second later, I had the flash drive in my hand. Yes! But Chris pulled back so abruptly that he knocked the flash drive out of my hand. It hit the metal floor with a crash. I tried to push the flash drive under the cart with my foot, but Chris had already looked down and was clutching at the pocket of his pants. He said he had just dropped a very important item. I politely offered to help with the search, but Chris quickly saw the flash drive and put it back in his pants pocket. And then he looked me straight in the eye and said that even though his vision was -7, he immediately saw a striking resemblance between me and the mayor's girlfriend, Lila. And she also passionately hugged in public with her boyfriend, Ben. My heart sank with fear. Did he see through me? Trying not to show my excitement, I replied coldly that I had no idea who this Lila was. Chris said that he would love to tell such a beauty about politics, but now was not the time and place. But he was in a hurry to work. He reached for the call button again. "No, you're not leaving here until I get the flash drive." I tried to kiss him again, but this time he politely pushed me away. "Am I not good enough for you, mister?" Chris said that unlike Ben Hayes, the controversial mayoral candidate, he didn't kiss girls he didn't know. "What do you mean?" Chris grimaced and reluctantly told me that Ben had been caught with a mulatto woman this weekend. He gave her flowers and they went somewhere holding hands. And his girlfriend Lila probably didn't know what he was doing. My heart sank in pain. No, Ben's not like that. He couldn't do this to me. I was at a loss, and Chris managed to press the button to call the dispatcher. Oh no. Chris said that we were stuck, and the speaker said that the elevator would go in a minute. There was no time to make a mistake, so I started counting down the seconds in my head. Chris suddenly took off his glasses and began to wipe them. Yes, -7. He couldn't see anything without his glasses. I pushed the cart hard and it hit Chris right on the elbow. The glasses fell out and flew somewhere on the floor. Damn. I'm sorry, that stupid cart had a broken wheel a long time ago. Chris looked at me with displeasure and began to search for his glasses. I finally managed to grab the keychain, pull the flash drive out of his pocket, and clench it tightly in my fist. It worked! Chris wanted to let me go first out of the elevator, but I told him I was on the wrong floor and went back down. As soon as I left the building, I hailed a taxi. Within 15 minutes, I was at Ben's headquarters. "Ben! I got the damn flash drive! We're safe!" He grabbed it greedily from my hand and hugged me so tightly for the first time in his life. But after a couple of minutes, he looked back at his smartphone and said he had a lot to do. A lump of resentment rose in my throat. "Can't you see I miss you, Ben?" But he said he had an important meeting scheduled for the evening with a female government politician. Congresswoman Ben. Then I remembered what Chris had said about Ben having someone else. "Ben, what's on this flash drive? You still haven't told me what dirt they found." He hesitated in a strange way and began to mumble that there were documents and I would not understand anything in them. I realized he'd been lying to me all along. I snatched the flash drive out of Ben's hand and headed for the nearest laptop. Ben tried to stop me, but I pinned his foot down with all my strength. "Let's see what you're hiding from me, my love." Ben ran over to me, but I had already opened the flash drive on the laptop. But instead of documents or photos of Ben's, there were only pictures of Chris in a dinosaur costume. What the hell? In each photo, Chris held a sign with a letter on it. I read everything and they lined up in the phrase, "Don't trust anyone." At the same time, our press secretary called me and asked me to open the news immediately. Ben's phone was ringing too. I immediately opened the news portal and browser. On the front page, my love was hugging a mulatto woman in a restaurant. At the bottom of the article was the postscript. The photos arrived at the publishing house around 7 a.m. So Chris passed on the dirt before we met in the elevator. Ben started to tell me that this was a Photoshop that I did not understand. And indeed, I had myself to blame. I slapped him hard and left. I was choking with resentment and pain. What a fool I was. Ben didn't love me. I was just a convenient beauty who fulfilled all his whims. Then I got a text from Chris. He asked me out on a date. Since I was free now, how did he get my number? I didn't want to know though. After today, all I wanted to do was get drunk. I'll meet you at the bar, Chris. I'll tell you a lot more about Ben and his dirty tricks. That morning, I was woken up by a call from my dream company. The boss really liked my resume, and I was called for an interview. Hooray! But I needed to get ready. The interview's in 3 hours. I quickly put on a blouse, a self-made miniskirt, and Jimmy Choo shoes. By noon, I was already in the company building. But due to traffic jams, I had only 5 minutes left before the meeting. I rushed to the elevator. But hell, it was broken. In desperation, I even glanced at the stairs. But climbing to the 45th floor in shoes was not an option. A scowling man in an expensive suit who was standing nearby cursed and said that there was a freight elevator at the other end of the building and went there. I and Beauty with great hair followed him. There was another guy near the freight elevator. He smiled at me, so cute and positive. His face looked familiar. The doors opened. I hesitated for a second. I was scared to go alone with 3 men in this gloomy elevator. I looked at my watch. Only a minute left to get to the 45th floor. There was no choice. Inside, the cabin didn't look like much, and the elevator was clearly rarely used. We were going awfully slow, and I couldn't help but give every stranger in the elevator a nickname. The one who brought us here, very confused, was Nerd. I'd already given Beauty a nickname, and the one at the elevator was Pretty. It was probably the 100th time I looked at my watch. 12:05, that's it, I'm late. Now my career was over. I was so upset. Suddenly, the cabin swayed violently and I couldn't resist falling on top of Pretty. The elevator stopped. Beauty immediately started freaking out and pressed the button to call the dispatcher. But no one answered him. The elevator stood still. Nerd tried to calm us down, said that he already got stuck in this building, and we could be released soon. I took out my phone, but there was no connection. Nerd also checked and said that it looked like there was no signal in this damned elevator. Damn it, looked like we were trapped. 10 minutes passed, but the elevator didn't move. Nerd thoughtfully said that it was strange. It should not be so. The elevator might have been seriously damaged. I felt uneasy. Beauty started whining that he would sue these repairmen and everyone in this building. He slammed his fist into the speaker. That's nervous. I cried out in surprise, and Nerd suggested that maybe the connection in the elevator was damaged during braking. But it still needed to be fixed. We were waiting. I felt terrible around 3 men I didn't know. At one point, I thought I was suffocating. Suddenly, the elevator creaked loudly and jerked down. We flew several floors, and I already said goodbye to life. In the end, the cap braked and we fell to the floor. I hit the floor so hard and saw that I had broken the heel of my expensive shoes. Heck! Beauty stopped yelling, and now he was silently shaking with fear. Nerd was swearing loudly, and Pretty pressed himself against the wall and gripped the railing with his fingers. The elevator rocked and creaked softly. It seemed that one careless movement and it would collapse. Besides, I thought I smelled smoke. I got scared and started shaking. Pretty came up to me and put his hand on my shoulder. He started saying that everything was fine and we would manage. Finally, we heard some static and the dispatcher's voice. There is a fire in the building. I repeat, there is a fire in the building. Don't panic. Help is on the way. Immediately, the connection was cut off. I was afraid that we were lost and I started banging on the elevator door with all my might, but Nerd stopped me. We heard again from the speaker. We'll get you out. Don't try to open the elevator door yourself. Then the dispatcher went offline again. Beauty started yelling that the Mercedes he borrowed was parked right in front of the building, and that he had to save his car. Nerd shut him up and suggested that we follow the instructions if we want to wait for rescuers. We need to sit on the floor, so there's more chance of not suffocating. We all slid down, and sure enough, there was less of a burning smell. While Nerd was thinking about something in silence, Pretty tried to distract me. He asked me about everything, joked, but then his gaze lingered on my face. He stopped abruptly and swallowed. His eyes were blazing madly. That look sent a chill down my spine. And the Nerd abruptly blurted out that we needed to get ourselves out. We would probably run out of oxygen before the rescue team found us, especially if we continued to panic. We needed to open the elevator doors. Nerd quickly got to his feet and began to pull off the handrail to use it as a lever for the doors. The elevator shook again. We were going to crash. Pretty tried to stop him, but he didn't want to listen to anyone. Then he put his hand on his shoulder. But Nerd threw it off and said, "Don't touch me, okay?" He looked menacing and Pretty immediately retreated. Damn, I was so scared. I said that the fight would only make the oxygen run out faster and that we should work together. Although Pretty was on edge, he agreed. It did work out to tear off the handrail. We were doomed. I looked at Beauty. He was sweating and gasping for breath. He became hysterical that he was not ready to die. After all, he took the Mercedes on credit to impress the girl and admit his love to her. But he never got the chance. What's wrong with you guys? One almost got into a fight, the other won't shut up about his Mercedes. I suddenly felt bad. My head started to spin and I felt sick. Was I going to die here without getting help? Nerd asked me if I had something in my purse that I could hook a trapdoor in the ceiling. The smoke was getting worse. I barely forced myself to rummage in my bag and gave Nerd a nail file. What if this was the only chance of salvation? Nerd got his feet on the rail and started to pry the hatch with my nail file. And the lid gave way! Nerd ordered me to climb on his shoulders and into the hatch to look around. Well, no, there was no way I was going to sit on that dude's shoulder in my short skirt. Pretty told him to stay out of my way. Nerd gritted his teeth, then jumped up, clung to the hatch, and climbed in himself. Pretty asked if I was alright, and I thanked him for his help. At some point, our eyes met, and again I saw that predatory look. His face was getting closer. He clearly wanted to kiss me. What? I tried to push him away, but he leaned over my ear, breathed languidly, and began to whisper. He said he didn't recognize me right away, but he remembered. What did it mean? He tried to kiss me again. And this time I pushed him away so hard and turned to Beauty. But he was hurtled in the corner sobbing. Cowardly brute. Pretty didn't seem so cute anymore. His gaze became crazy. I suddenly remembered him. I looked him squarely in the eye and shouted, "Damn, so it's you who's that fat guy that I've been pushing away all the time. Yes, I didn't recognize you." He began to move slowly again, and then I looked into his eyes and shouted, "I remember you. You're Jack. You were disgusting to me, and you haven't changed at all." My words seemed to throw him into shock. He froze and stared at one point without moving. Looks like I've got him restrained. At that moment, I heard Nerd from the hatch. He said that there was an exit upstairs, but someone needed to help him get to it. I didn't care about the short skirt just to get out of there. I asked Nerd to give me a hand, and when he held it out, I started climbing up on the roof. The steel ropes creaked dangerously as I climbed through the open hatch. I saw that one of them was almost torn off. On the roof, I looked around. The door to the floor was high up. Nerd said I should climb up the steel ledges and call for help. But why me? He threatened me and said that he would lug me up there if I did get in. Coward! He was just afraid to fall out of there. I balked and said I wouldn't climb. Nerd was furious and had swung at me. When suddenly we heard dispatcher's voice. After 5 seconds, the elevator starts to descend. The countdown started. I wanted to go down to the cab, but Nerd pushed me roughly away and jumped down. The lid slammed shut and I couldn't open it. I begged him to open it, but Nerd just left me. The elevator jerked and began to climb up. Smoke suddenly poured out of the shaft. I almost fell off the floor, barely able to keep my balance. I thought I was going to fall. Suddenly, one of the cables snapped and the elevator stood still again. Oh no! The smoke was already everywhere, and I could barely breathe. I saw that they were trying to open the door upstairs. With the last of my strength, I pulled myself up the remaining rope and climbed up. Save me! I need help! The smoke was so thick and acrid. I tried not to pass out. My eyes were already closing and I was about to fall when I suddenly felt someone dragging me up. I was coming to my senses. And at some point, I got another call from the same firm and was asked to come for an interview. After everything that happened to me that day, I just had to get to their office. This time I put on sneakers and walked all 45 floors. I knocked on the door to my boss's office. And when I opened the door, Nerdo seemed as surprised as I was sitting at the table. I abruptly closed the door. I've had enough.
We ran forward as fast as we could, but we must not stop. The cannibals have almost caught up with us. The wall that separated the city from the rest of the island was a kilometer away. We have to make it at any cost. Sam and I are journalists, and we came here to do a story about the cannibal city. I was sure it was just a rumor, but now the crowd of savages was almost upon us. In desperation, I turned to the side. There was an abandoned shopping center. Sam followed, still holding the camera. I looked around the room frantically. There was no point in running to the shops. There were no glasses in the windows for a long time, and suddenly I saw an elevator. We ran to it and I pressed the button. The elevator still wasn't moving. I looked around and was horrified to see that the mall had been invaded by a crowd. And then the elevator doors creaked open. Sam and I jumped in, and I pressed the close button. The doors were closing so slowly, and the cannibals were already running towards us. This was the end. I already started going over the images of my life. And why did we just come here? I always wanted to be a well-known journalist, and went head over heels. So when I heard about the Cannibal Island scandal, I realized this was my chance to become famous. The government had enclosed the captured city with a wall, and no one dared to enter it. And I decided. And my obnoxious colleague Sam stuck with me. That's how we ended up in this hellish place. I was startled out of my reverie by one of the savages grabbing my leg. I felt a piercing pain from the fingernails and screamed, but with the last of my strength, I kicked him with my other foot. How painful! He jumped back as the elevator doors finally slammed shut. We made it, Sam. He kicked the button board with all his might, and the elevator blinked. Now the doors couldn't be opened. They were jammed, and we could get out through the hatch into the shaft. We're safe, Sam said. But the beasts continued to pound on the door anyway, and every time they hit the elevator, I flinched. I looked at Sam, and he suddenly turned the camera to my leg. What? I looked down, my head spinning. The whole leg was torn and covered in deep marks. I immediately remembered the long, dirty fingernails of the cannibal that had clung to me, and my heart sank. Before that, probably because of fear, I didn't even feel pain. But now my leg felt like it was burning. Sam took a close-up of it. I almost started to cry, but then Sam hugged me, and he said that the leg would heal up, and we would definitely survive, and there was no way he was going to leave me. I was ashamed for a second, because I thought Sam was a cold, calculating egotist. And now he took care of me. He even tore off the sleeve of his shirt and bandaged my wound. He recorded everything on the camera, and the cannibals continued to break into the door. I didn't know what to do. We couldn't get out while these beasts were watching us, and we couldn't stay here forever either. But there were no other options. We opened their backpacks, stew, water, bars, if anything that was enough for 2 days. And I checked my phone, but of course there was no connection. Sam filmed my every action. The banging on the door only got worse. The cannibals seemed to be losing their temper. I started to panic. Sam suddenly said that when we got out, we'd get fame in the Best Reporter award. After all, we were the first to show unique footage from the island of cannibals. His words calmed me down a little. Yes, I will be the best. I'll surpass everyone who said I wasn't amount to anything. All I had to do was get out. The cannibals were banging harder. I panicked again, so did Sam. We woke up almost in sync. What? Had we fallen asleep? How long did we sleep? Due to stress and fatigue, we just passed out. I could hardly remember what happened before. We listened. There was no more pounding on the door. Had they gone? But before I could be happy, I brushed against my bad leg and felt a sharp pain. My leg was already swollen. Almost crying, I showed Sam my leg, and it only made me feel worse. Sam just turned on the camera and made a stupid joke that I would soon turn into a cannibal. Perfect timing. I urgently needed antibiotics, but there was no first aid kit in my backpack for some reason. Maybe I dropped it during the chase. The only way out was to look for medicines in the shopping center. I knew that in a few hours, I wouldn't be able to stand on my feet. Sam agreed to come with me, but only if I caught it on a GoPro camera. That's not what I needed to think about right now, but I agreed. He put the GoPro on my head, and we listened. Everything was quiet. Sam carefully opened the hatch of the elevator. At the thought that we might run into the cannibals, the blood froze in my veins. Sam helped me out, and soon we were climbing out through the shaft. It was light outside, so we were out all night. I looked around and immediately noticed the sign. Pharmacy! Very close! But before I could take a step, a savage came around a corner and ran towards me, making terrible noises. Sam, back up! He immediately jumped into the shaft and crawled into the elevator. I followed him, and as soon as we had closed the hatch, the savage began to break into it. My heart was pounding, and my leg was aching. I began to think that I had an infection. The only way to escape was to get the medicine. I said this to Sam, but he mumbled that he had hit himself hard when he fell into the elevator, and now he couldn't walk. Strange, just a minute ago, everything was fine, but I knew that if I didn't get the antibiotic now, I'd be finished. The savage continued to pound on the elevator's hatch. Damn, I need to distract him somehow. I rummaged in my bag and found hairspray. I didn't think it would help me, but I felt the lighter in my pocket, and it hit me. I hope it works. I opened the hatch abruptly. The savage was already hissing and ready to attack. I immediately put the lighter under the spray. A flash of fire burned the cannibal, and he fell screaming into the shaft. Got it! I immediately got out and rushed to the pharmacy alone. When I got there, I immediately hid behind the shelf. I think it worked. No one chased me. There were still some drugs left on the shelves. I noticed the first aid kit on the floor and immediately grabbed it. At that moment, I looked out the window and saw our car. An emergency exit led directly to it from the pharmacy. If we get through the savages, we can get out of here. I just needed to get to Sam. I turned around and was stunned with horror. Right in front of me was a cannibal. I was so excited about the emergency exit that I didn't even hear him approach me. He was a centimeter away from me. But then I grabbed a bottle and hit him on the head. The beast twisted in pain, and I rushed to Sam. I got there quickly. Sam was there, and I breathed a sigh of relief. But then a hand reached out from above. The cannibal. God, I didn't close the hatch. I dropped my backpack and immediately slammed it shut, and tried to hold on with all my strength. But the savage was stronger. Sam, help me! But he was in no hurry. My hands were getting weaker by the second, and I couldn't stand it and let go of the lid. At that moment, the savage, who continued to pull it on himself, fell into the shaft. That was so close. I looked at Sam reproachfully. Why did he help me? But all Sam said was that he couldn't leave the camera, and that he acted that he had already examined the first aid kit, but it turned out that there were only empty bottles in it. Did I take the wrong box? There was another banging on the elevator door, and I was desperate. Tears welled up in my eyes. But Sam suddenly said I was so brave. Together, we would succeed. Because I was the same as him. I was ready to do anything for the sake of a dream. His words cheered me up a little, and I quickly told Sam about the emergency exit at the pharmacy, and he was also very happy. We would get out of there soon. We decided to wait until nightfall, until the cannibals got tired of breaking through and left. To calm down, we told each other stories. Sam was a good conversationalist. However, he filmed on camera even this. But soon the battery was dead, and I hid it in my backpack. Right now, the main thing was to get out of there alive, and we already had a lot of shots. At some point, Sam shushed me. I think it's time. We quickly climbed out through the shaft. My heart was pounding. Sam, hush! Suddenly, shards of glass crunched loudly under my feet. Oh no, they would wake up. Sam and I looked at each other, but the savages were nowhere to be seen. That was close. We tiptoed to the exit, and I tried not to breathe, so as not to make any unnecessary sounds. And then we were out on the street, running as fast as we could to the car. But suddenly, Sam stumbled. As I helped him to his feet, a bottle of antibiotics fell out of his pocket. Stop! But you said the first aid kit was empty. Then Sam's face twisted into a grin. What's happening? He said he just didn't want to give up to me. What? Are you kidding? I might die. But Sam said that was what he wanted. After all, then all the glory would go to him, and I would remain a loser, a missing person, and he wouldn't have to push me into the hands of cannibals. The audience would only see how he tried to help me and bandage my wounds. I was taken aback, not believing his words, but then Sam abruptly snatched the backpack with the camera from me and ran to the car. I quickly picked up the bottle of antibiotics, swallowed the pill as I went, and ran after him. Oh no, Sam! And then he started shouting loudly. I realized with horror that he was waking up the savages. There were a lot of them in the dark and they woke up. Sam climbed into the car, and I ran over and tried to handle, but it wouldn't budge. That bastard locked the doors. I was about to be torn to pieces. At that moment, he started the engine. No, it can't end like this. I ran after the cars as fast as I could, and at the last moment, I clung to the trunk. Got it! I struggled to get on top of it, but Sam started maneuvering to throw me off. What are you doing? I held on as fast as I could. A pack of cannibals was running behind the car, and at any moment, I could fall right on top of them. But suddenly the car jerked violently. There was a pop, and it stopped. What's happening? I jumped off the trunk, and I realized that the tire had burst. I started to panic. I looked back and saw the savages. Furious, they were too close. Limping, I ran to the gate in the wall. Come on, there's not much left. And when I was almost there, it hit me. Where was Sam anyway? I turned and saw that he had got out of the car and was barely dragging himself, and the savages were catching up with him. I wanted so badly to see Sam torn apart after his betrayal. He was ready to give me up for some shots. But then something inside me quivered. It wasn't long ago that I was ready to go head over heels for fame too. I suddenly realized that people could be as good as savages. But no, I'm human. I made an effort and quickly returned to Sam. I took his arm and pulled him along, and all I could think was, if I had really spent my entire life neglecting others for my own purposes, just like Sam. There were only a couple of meters left, and here it was, the exit. We got out on last breath, and I managed to slam the gate shut. At the same moment, the cannibals began to drum wildly on it. Tears welled up in my eyes. We are saved. Is it really over? We went through so much for these shots. But Sam suddenly interrupted me and calmly said that the camera was left in the car. Couldn't believe it. Sam grinned enigmatically. Did you like the video? Then subscribe and like it. Support the channel. Thank you.